Welcome back to another episode of the IFC's Individuation podcast. I'm Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai, and with me today is Dr. Lisa Hong. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
And Dr. Eric Tomlinson, who has his face contorted. I don't know. Is that okay? Is the sun in your eyes, Eric, or what's going on?
No, I'm just thinking of the things that you said prior to the
Oh, okay. All right. And that's what happens when I start talking deeply. I contort people's faces in weird.
podcast.
Anyway, so welcome back. So we're going to talk about the complexes in season 3 and season 4 of Stranger Things. We're going to start. This is a Netflix series. It's worldwide. It's one of the most watched series in the world. And the question for us was, why is there so much interest in the series? What is it about these kids fighting these monsters that makes it so appealing? We have a lot of shows with monsters and people fighting monsters. They're not all appealing. They're not all, oh, I'm going to sit through 4 seasons of this. So what we're going to do today is go through the rest of season 2, and then we're going to recap season 2, and then we're going to go into season 3 and 4. We're going to talk about the evolution of this group and how they start to see themselves in the world around them. So they're already changing. They're already growing physically. They're already psychologically maturing after season 1 and their first traumas. And at the end of season 2, Dr. Eric, you want to tell us what happens in the end of season 2? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk about it for a little bit. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Season 2, episode 7. Elle finally runs into her sister, Kylie. She finds her sister through her mother, and her sister is someone who has grown up on the streets and is very street smart, very streetwise, and she has her own little gang, and that does basic crimes, and what happens is Elle becomes a part of them, and then when it comes time to Elle to really do something serious like kill somebody, she refuses to do it and can't be a part of that kind of thing, even though she loved being with her sister. And so she decided to go back, and she did. She went back to help the sheriff and the boys. And and so because all of them were under attack. And so what happened is the group figured out that the shadow monster is something called the Mind Slayer.
Mhm.
And
So
it's
that's
like
interesting, right? Symbolic, right?
yes.
So what is that symbolic of when we call something the Mind Slayer? What do you think, Lisa? What comes to mind?
It's that trauma,
Yeah,
that fight, flight, freeze.
yeah. So the mind is slain.
Mhm.
I take over the mind. I destroy. I slay the mind slayer, right? Very particular. Go on, Dr. Eric.
Yeah, sure. And then when the group figures this out, that the shadow monster is the Mind Slayer and is like a brain that controls everything. It's kind of like the Borg, if you've ever seen Star Trek Next Generation. And so they know that they have to kill the brain. But they also know that Will's connected to it. And if they kill the brain, Will's going to die. That's their fear. And so then Elle shows up. And Elle shows up in the last episode of the season. Elle shows up and says, I can close the gate. And she tells them all, I can close the gate. And
it's at a personal risk to her, though.
Oh, huge risk
Yeah.
because
You
she
want to
doesn't
talk,
know if she has
wait,
the
you want to
power to
talk a
close
little
the
bit
gate.
about that, about why it's so, why that's so complicated for her?
Well, on a number of levels, because the most basic functional one is that do I have the power to do this? This is
Okay.
big. And I think the next thing is it may possibly in her thinking is that if I do this, what's going to happen to everyone? What's
Mm.
going to happen to me? Am I just going to then go off into the energy belt that I've been a part of my whole life? How
Yeah,
am I going to think? How am I going to feel?
is it going to destroy me, right? The fear is?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. She's
Yeah.
concerned about what it's going to
But
do to her.
why do you think, Lisa, why do you think she volunteered for such a dangerous thing? What do you think that was about?
It,
What's the
and
motivation behind her trying to close the gate?
she's protecting everyone, and she feels
Yeah.
that she is the only person with the knowledge to close it
Mhm.
because she also recognizes she's the one that opened it.
Mm,
Very good.
yeah, so she has to face her terror again. Because remember, the first time she faced the terror, she tore the hole. So the second time, the end of season 2, is to close the hole. Right? Okay, go on, Dr. Eric.
Yeah, and then she and the sheriff go down to close, to close the gate. And when she did, she was using her power, but it wasn't enough to close it. Then she remembered what her sister told her: use what makes you angry.
Mm.
And she
Well, let's
started,
talk about the sister a little bit, because this is a very interesting point you're making.
yeah,
She tells her to use her anger, her rage.
yes.
Okay, but where did she learn that? Where did she learn to use her anger and her rage?
I think she learned that growing up on the street by herself.
Yeah, but it was also taught to them, right? It was also taught to them at where Papa
Yeah, the
is.
institution
Oh,
did encourage a
yes.
lot of competition and adversity, and adversity within and among each other.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
I'm going to teach you by making you react.
Yes.
Good point, Dr.
Making you
Lahab.
be afraid of loss.
Yes.
Because he told them that this is ultimately going to kill you if you
Very
can't control
interesting,
it.
right? This is very
Yes,
interesting, right? So some of them who escaped, like her sister who escaped, was one of the prisoners there, right? As a
yes, she
child.
was number 8.
So she was number 8. So 11 meets number 8, her sister, and so what she realizes very quickly is that she's become hardened. Like she also has a group of friends. She also has the archetypes around her, if you noticed. She also runs with them, right? And she protects them. But they've decided that they're going to live as outsiders in the world, and they're going to keep away from the rest of the world, and they're going to take what they need, and they're just not going to interact. So they've chosen to respond to the trauma by fighting with it and hiding from it. So when I'm angry and I'm terrified, what do I want to do? I want to rain havoc on people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The trauma does that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Lisa, what are you thinking? That trauma and how we start to see our world. Like
Sometimes people think that it gives you fire and focus when it
Oh,
actually
yes.
it sucks it in, makes you
Exactly.
pretty myopic.
Yeah.
Mhm,
That's a great that's a great visual.
mhm.
So we think that it does what?
It gives you a focus or a drive or a
Yeah.
purpose.
So it gives you energy and power and a focus and a drive. But what really happens, what happens? It implodes. It self-implodes. Right?
God, what a great point for
Yeah,
both of you.
it's perfect.
That's
No, it's Lisa's point. It's perfect point.
it really is.
This is what happens in the trauma. This is what happens. So the blast radius is outside of you, but there's also a blast radius within you. So the blast radius of the outside is going to spread. The blast radius on the inside is going to fold on itself.
Yeah. This thank you, Lisa. That was tremendous.
Yeah.
Because the point that I'm listening to, at least, is the essence of trauma.
Yeah. So what?
It's the power in both directions that trauma has.
Correct. Yeah. So what Elle was doing by closing the gate was forcing it to implode on itself. That was the force of closing the gate.
Yeah.
Right? Because what did she do when she was traumatized? The explosion went outward, it opened the gate. She basically was trying to heal the situation, as we do with JAMP. What we're doing is closing that door by letting the material that needs to come out, and the material that needs to go in, right? Because there's material that we need to integrate. So what do these kids need to integrate? What do our heroes need to integrate? They need to integrate their fear. They need to integrate their anger. They need to integrate their
I'd even go so far as
on.
integrating their present
Absolutely.
and their
Go on.
past and their future.
Yeah. This is all about, this is the integration season. So season 2 is all about integrating, finding will. How do we integrate? How do we heal will? How do we heal our environment? How do we heal people around us? How do we heal our friends? How do we heal our community, right? And so 11 jumps up and takes responsibility. Right. She's becoming her own. She grows out her hair. Her hair is longer, it shows maturity, more adult-like type of behavior. She starts to dress in a certain way, starts to see herself in a different way. Right? There's a lot of healing in the second season.
Mhm.
She's feeling more of her personal power.
Mm,
And creating her own boundaries
Yes.
and testing them.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Healing,
Mhm.
creating boundaries, testing them, being a child again, being an adolescent, being a young adult, being who you are again. That the world is no longer this terrible place that is out to get me. No, I actually have power. And that second season, that's all about, we have power. We could do stuff. We could close the gate. We could fight it off. That's what they learned in season 2. So let's start talking about season 3.
Sure.
Because season 3, things start falling apart slowly. Like there's a slow drum towards things not as we thought. The victory was incomplete, right? And we have this with Jamp a lot, where we feel like we've done so much work in the first session. But yeah, Lisa, you want to talk about it a little bit? But as sessions go on, you start to notice that, wait a second, did I miss something?
or you feel like you're being drawn back.
Yeah. Did I
You're
not
like,
cover
"Oh,
something?
yeah, I was
Do I
just
have to
here.
go back?
Or yeah, do I have to go back there? But you do. You have to
Yeah.
see it in a different from a different place, because you are in a different place at that point when you do go back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the storyline may seem familiar. You're still in a different place. Mhm.
Yeah, because we never re-enter the situation we left in the same way. Right? Because it's a doorway, and we talk a lot about this in von Franz's work, right? When you go into the underworld, you never come from the underworld from the same door.
Mhm.
The door you enter is not the door you leave from, although it is the point of origin. So you always have to find that door, but it's the point of origin, but it's never the same door. I think they had that in the Matrix. When I don't know, do you remember the Matrix, Lisa? Eric, you
I
remember the
think
Matrix?
you're thinking
Yeah.
of I'm not sure which Matrix it was, but he's with the Keymaster.
Yes, the key master in the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, okay, here's the doorway. Here, let me
Mhm.
open this doorway. And he takes out like this huge key ring, right? And he has all these keys. And he's like, oh, not this one, not this one, not this one. It's like anytime now. Yeah. So what they realize is that there are multiple doors. They realize that that they're not kids anymore, that it's a little bit more complicated than just winning the ball game and going home. There's actual things that are occurring. And then Will, with fear in his face, and his voice is kind of trembling, says, I don't think we got rid of him. Right? I think there are pieces of him that are still here. And when the trauma is not treated, the pieces start showing. Right? They're almost like embedded in the ground. You're walking barefoot and it cuts you. But you hadn't seen it. It's embedded there. What do we think? What do we think of that setback for our heroes?
Well, I think you kind of nodded your head towards it. The way that it was shut, it wasn't
Yeah.
done in a complete manner.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
they shut
think,
the gate, but they didn't take care of all the pieces.
right.
The pieces stayed on
Mhm.
because they were held within Will. Will was holding on to the pieces. So when he released them, they ended up with Max's brother, who takes on a bigger role in this season. He's a lifeguard, and it's their summer off, but they're too busy, right? And then you have the news reporters who are looking for Darths everywhere. So they go finding them, and they're saying they're giant rats. Right? We have an infestation of giant rats, but it's not rats. But then she notices that even the news, the paper, the people who are employed at the paper are not acting right. They're sweating. There's something wrong about them. They're acting strange. What do we think is going on? How do the sweating, the irritation, the Will kind of holding the back of his neck, going, I could feel it on the back of my neck. What do we think of these things?
Well, I wanted to share a thought
Yeah.
that goes back to the very beginning of what you're saying.
Okay.
And it's also a transition from what has happened in season 1 and 2. And that is, even when we have tremendous victory over something that maybe we've been battling our entire life, just because we have that huge, major victory that makes it seem like it's gone, there's still fallout from it.
Yeah.
And we can't be so caught up in the elation of overcoming something that we don't see its fallout. That
Yeah.
because we need to back ourselves up at that point and enjoy the victory we have. It's kind of like in NFL football. You enjoy the victory that you have, but you know what? You've got a game in 7 days. You better get ready for it. This victory isn't going to carry you through the rest of your life. You still have to fight. And that's what I like about what's getting ready to happen to them. They're all at the end of season 2. They're all at the prom after a month of having these wonderful relationships together, and they think the world is perfect from this point forward. And then there's the big giant spider over their building. And then it goes to season 3. They've accomplished an incredible amount that they should be proud of, but there's still a fight that continues. We got to continue on.
Yeah, the fight goes on.
That's what I wanted to say that happened between the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3.
Yeah, we also realize that the trauma has spread quite wide. It's no longer contained within their group. The trauma spread into the outside, into the people who are at the paper, into the mall. The mall becomes a prime theme in season 3. The mall is where everybody goes. What they realize is something weird is going on near the mall. There are people who are, what we end up learning is that there are Soviets, KGB agents, or Russians. I'm not sure if they're Soviets or Russians at this point. Are they Russians or are they Soviets? KGB. I think it was an old KGB unit that was trying to basically get access to the tear that's underneath the city, to capture some of the creatures and use them as weapons in their fight against the United States and the CIA, because they believed that the US was using them, that they had new warfare that they were planning for them by opening this gateway. So in season 3, what we see is that now you have a different team. The younger siblings start to get involved. So they start to want to infiltrate, and they have to crawl through a vent that's, I don't know how many meters, but like 500, 600 meters. They have to crawl through to get to the space where they think something weird is going on. So that would be where we end this episode. This is part 1 of our 2-part episode of Stranger Things. And so we will be back in part 2 of our last episode of Stranger Things. And for this week, so we wanted to say, as always, we are the Institute for Conflict, and we are not afraid.
We are not afraid.
We are not afraid.
We're not afraid, and we will be back next week with part 2 of Stranger Things.